All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Hallie. I'm a member of the Quad Education team. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on planning for the transition between junior and senior year. We're so glad you could join us. We have two of our fantastic consultants here today who are going to walk us through this topic. Definitely a big transition, and hopefully they can put your minds at ease and walk you through the steps to take to prepare yourself for senior year. For those of you that don't know, Quad Education is an admissions consulting company. We work with students and families throughout the entire college admissions process, starting from late middle school, early high school, all the way through actually graduating high school and choosing which college you're going to attend in the fall. We are recording this webinar, so you'll get the recording in an email within the next few days. You can refer back as needed. And let's see, so I'll have our consultants introduce themselves in just a second, and then we'll talk a little bit about academic planning, extracurricular planning, milestones you should be aiming for. We'll go over some tips for staying on track, and then we'll open things up for a Q&A. So if you have questions during this, pop those in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end. And again, we are recording this, so don't worry, you'll get a copy. You got a copy in your email if you need to step away or want to refer back at a later time. Let's see, Marina, you want to introduce yourself for us?
Marina, and I'm a counselor with Quad. I went to the University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, where I studied at the Wharton School of Business and did concentrations in finance management. I think pretty straightforward. You get a few different concentrations, so sometimes I even kind of forget which ones they were, but business related. And after graduating, have been doing a lot of alumni interviews, and then I went to get my graduate degree at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business many years later, but was on the student admissions committee there, and love working with students on their admissions process and everything. So looking forward to chatting with you about this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Dominique, can you introduce yourself for us?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique. I am an admissions consultant here at Quad. So I work with students to get them through this very period, right, where you are applying to college and figuring out which college you want to go to in the application process itself. I have some experience doing that in the public school setting as well. Most of my career I've spent working with middle and high school students and just kind of advising them through these very things that we're going to talk about: academic planning, extracurricular planning, how to make your profile really shine when it comes time to really selling yourself to colleges. As far as my educational background, I attended Dartmouth College for undergrad. I was a tour guide when I was there, working adjacent to the admissions office. And then after I graduated from Dartmouth, I also was able to serve as an alumni interviewer for a bit. So I got a little bit of insight into, what the college is really looking for as far as, different traits in their applicants. And I'm excited to be here and jump in.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both again for being here. So glad to have you. And with that, let's dive in and talk about academic planning.
All right, perfect. I can jump in first. So we will talk a little bit about really just thinking about what sorts of courses you want to take. The first thing you really want to do here going into your senior year is really, just start reflecting. How have you done over the course of the first 3 years of high school? Do you feel like there is some room for improvement, or ways that you want to maybe boost your GPA, or ways that you want to potentially tell a different story than what you've already told? And so some examples of that is, say, you're really interested, you're thinking about wanting to go into medicine, right? Which is what I studied at Dartmouth. And maybe, your freshman year, you didn't do so well in your biology course. Is there a course that you can pick to kind of make up for that? Can you maybe challenge yourself with AP biology or something like that, where you can really go in and show, hey, I've improved and I know what I'm doing here, and I can study, and I can, kind of take my experiences that I've had before and really show that I can make a change and really prove that I can do this. And so a big piece of this first part here is just really kind of reflecting on, how you've done in the past, and then ways that you want to kind of fill those gaps. And I think, these next few slides, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Do you want me to just do this whole part? Does that make
Sure.
sense? Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of these are very interconnected, so I'll just run with this. So like I said, reflecting on your GPA, assessing the difficulty of courses is another big thing. I'm sure many of you have heard, if you are thinking about what is going to look quote unquote good to a college, something that is almost never a bad idea is challenging yourself as much as possible in your courses. And so can you take an honors or AP level or a dual credit level course in some of your areas of interest? That being said, sometimes that comes at a cost, right? And so I am never going to advocate to fully load yourself up with all APs, all college level courses, if it's going to come at the expense of you doing well on the SAT, if it's going to come at the expense of you being able to take on a leadership role or really stay significantly involved in some of your extracurriculars. And so there's a little bit of strategy involved here as far as, how many rigorous courses you take and in which areas you take them. Like I mentioned before, if you have kind of a gap or an area that you feel like you need to make up for your first 3 years of high school, definitely challenge yourself there. Make that be a place where you choose a course that's very challenging. I would also argue, if you're on the fence about maybe taking a certain AP level course or something like that, if it's not going to be in direct service to the kind of narrative that you're putting forth, if it just feels a little bit random, there's nothing wrong with that. You absolutely can talk about in your application how, I was always interested in, U.S. history. So I decided to take a push and challenge myself. That's great, but don't do it just for the sake of saying I took another AP class. So it's really just about kind of, weighing what you have the capacity to do and making sure you are being very strategic. Is there a reason I'm taking this? Am I actually interested in it? Or am I just taking it to say I took 5 AP classes instead of 4? So that definitely would be kind of my advice there. Awesome. And then this just goes into a little bit more depth as to how course selection kind of works. If you are in high school, you probably are already very familiar with the difference between a core course and an elective. Of course, you need to make sure that your core course requirements are taken care of. And if you have not finished any of those, at least do the bare minimum to graduate, of course. But some colleges actually do, I think specifically for certain programs, may have specific courses that you would need to take. And so, this is a little bit kind of maybe for another webinar, but there's liberal arts colleges, and then there's research universities, and those are kind of two separate things. Most liberal arts colleges, you'll be able to just go and choose your major when you get there. With some of the research universities, majors like engineering and things like that, they may ask you specifically to apply to that program. And so you may need to, check some boxes. I have taken calculus, or I have taken, X number of science courses, whatever it is, to apply to that specific program. And so depending on what you're looking at, there may be some core courses that you are required to take. And so this is a good time, and we'll talk about this later, to start doing that college research and that program research, because if there's a program you really want to do and you don't have a certain course or two, you're going to need to make sure you fit that in during your senior year. And then I talked a little bit already about kind of the balancing act and the strategy behind choosing AP and honors courses, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that. And I just talked about this. I jumped ahead of myself. So I already just mentioned this, researching college requirements as early as possible. Again, it really depends on your goals. If you're applying to most liberal arts schools, you should be fine with your high school's kind of set of required courses, but it doesn't hurt to double check and just make sure you're on track, especially if there's a certain school that's, a dream school for you that for sure you want to go to. There's nothing worse than being heartbroken knowing that you just simply cannot fit it in because you didn't plan ahead far enough to take a certain course.
All right, extracurricular planning.
I can kick us off on this one. So just like you reflect on your academics and see what you've done, where there are gaps, where you want to maybe show a different kind of interest, you also want to take this time to take a look at what you've done extracurricularly. So thinking about this, there are different parts of the application, right, that will integrate your extracurricular activities. One is going to be, you're going to put together an activity list. You're also going to be writing essays, and the things that you've done outside of school will play a big role in that. So it's just really important to take a look and assess kind of what have I done, and see if it reflects what you might be interested in doing moving forward. So you might take a look, like, have I tried a bunch of things? Is there something that I like more than something else? What am I really good at? Where do I think maybe I could be able to like take on a greater leadership role or be more involved, really make like a difference, and not just be kind of like at the basic like participation level. Another very helpful thing to do is to document your achievements as you go. So some people, I know like at work, a lot of people call this like your brag folder or something like that. Whenever you get like a positive email or something, you put it in a special folder and you keep it until it's time for your self-review. The college prep equivalent of that might be having kind of a journal that you keep where you document some of that stuff that you achieved, because believe me, it doesn't seem hard, but it is actually very hard to remember all the things that you've done during the 4 years of high school. So making note of some of that stuff as you go can be really, really helpful. And even making note of things that don't feel necessarily like big achievements, like maybe somebody else want to look at that as like, oh my gosh, congratulations, like that's amazing, you won first place. Like maybe it's not something like that, but maybe if it was something that meant a lot to you, and that you felt proud of, definitely capture that, because that can be very helpful when you get to brainstorming for your essays and things like that. So highly recommend keeping kind of your high school journal. If you haven't started yet, now is a great time to do that, especially as you kind of come on to more leadership experiences and deeper experiences with your extracurriculars. And then finally, setting those leadership goals, right? We want to make sure that you're not just kind of like loosely participating in activities. It's okay to participate loosely in some activities for sure, because you're trying to test things out, see how they go, see what you like, see what you're good at, see what you're not good at, see what maybe you want to become good at, see what you're not interested in. This is good to do all of that trial. But we also want to figure out, okay, where am I going to really invest some more time and show leadership? Where might I be, on the board of a club, or where might I put together a project that really benefits like a group or organization? Finding kind of those opportunities to really show your growth. Yeah, go on to the next one, unless anything to add.
I would just jump in super quick. I love what you're saying about keeping like the brag sheet or journal or whatever it is about just things you've accomplished. I just want to underscore, especially having just come out of this recent season, one thing I see all the time is students struggle a lot with supplemental essays when it comes to talking about very, very common, it's just common supplements, common interview questions, when's the time you've struggled, or what's the time that you've learned X, Y, or Z lesson. It probably will not be a time where you've won an award necessarily, but really just thinking more deeply about those non-concrete accomplishments or experiences, as many as you can write down or think about. Hey, I was at work volunteering. Again, I'm going to take a pre-med example. I always do. This is what I have the most experience with. I was volunteering at the hospital that I work at, and a patient I work with said this to me, and it really impacted me. Write it down. You don't want to forget that. Those make such great stories. The more concrete you can be when it comes time to writing your personal narrative and your supplements, the better. You want to be able to tell a really compelling story. And so literally, if you have to write down quotes, just make sure you remember those moments, because you will just want to have a ton of material when it comes time to really write and put pen to paper. That's it. Thank you.
That's fun on that. Yeah, I think you're so right. People have a very hard time answering kind of like the not positive experience question, right? Like the failure, the challenge. So if something ever gets you down at school or in your extracurriculars, like capture it, capture how you react to it, capture what you do next. because those are really important to show that you're resilient and you think through your problems and things like that. And it is hard to think of them when you're, past that point, and if you haven't captured them. So I'll touch on this one and then feel free to chime in as well. So again, how do we kind of think about like, okay, well, what are we going to do moving forward? You've done your homework and self-reflection. Self-reflection is like a huge part of just like the whole college application process. It's identifying your strengths, your weaknesses, like what you're interested in, what colleges are the right fit. This is like a very important exercise all around in self-reflection. So you look at what you're currently doing and what do you want to keep doing? And maybe what do you think you want to try out while you have kind of all these opportunities around you to keep trying things in a sort of safe, like low risk space too. And as you're thinking about college and what you might want to study, like, is there something that you feel gapped in? Like, I've looked at my activities and I realize, I want to do something, I want to study business, but I've never done anything business related. You think about your activities and think, okay, does anything feel like it could be tangential or have similar learnings? Or is this an opportunity for me to try something new because I've just discovered this interest and see if it's really a fit? So you want to take a look at that. You want to research opportunities. Even looking at what's available at different schools can be helpful because part of your application is going to be, why do you want to go to this school? And part of that will be academic and part of that will be extracurricular and culture and all these things. But taking a look at what extracurriculars at universities might be of interest to you could help you also plan ahead for what you might want to try while you're in high school. And this last point here, definitely encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone. High school is the place where that's like somewhat secure. You can try new things without like high expectations, and college is like that too. You can certainly try new things. Like maybe you're not going to walk onto some like top athletic team, but there's certainly opportunities to try new things that feel outside of your comfort zone. But those can be really opportunities to show growth and to show like overcoming a challenge. So those are a few things to think about as you figure out, okay, this is what I've been working on in terms of school. This is what I've been doing in terms of my extracurriculars. What do I want to keep doing? And what else do I need to maybe add or try? Anything to add? Sorry, my voice is dropping a little.
Not a ton here. I may on the next slide. I think I have it last. Do you want me to jump in there?
Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. So, big thing to talk about here. I think this is very similar to talking about courses, right? This is all a balancing act. And so, really making sure you are prioritizing your time and making sure, again, like it's totally great to try something new and that's never going to be frowned upon, but doing too many things and spreading yourself too thin will not really ever be as valuable as really committing yourself to one or two things that you really love and that you can really tell a story about. It's actually, I think a lot of students are surprised when they get to the Common App or whatever application system they're using and they see how few words they have to talk about their extracurriculars in the resume portion. That's not really what's the most important, in my opinion. It's great that you have that list and it speaks to what you're interested in and what you've done and all of that. But really where I think a lot of the value comes in is where you have these really deep and meaningful experiences that you can then talk about in your supplements, kind of like what I was saying before. And so you're going to have a super limited word count to say some really basic stuff about some of your involvements. But if you don't have any sort of story to tell, or, I've spent so many hours doing this one thing I'm passionate about, and you're really able to show that passion through a 200, 300 word essay, that's where the value is going to come in. And so really, I just encourage you, if you don't feel like you have that thing, really think, well, what is something that I enjoy and that I'm doing currently where I can dive a little bit deeper. It doesn't even need to be, okay, now I'm going to become the president or take on a formal leadership role, but where can you really kind of give yourself that ability to really create this narrative where you have some sort of deep involvement in something?
All right, milestones.
Awesome. I'll take this one, and then we can switch off on these ones. So starting first, college research is a big one. This is tough. I won't lie. I think that this is one that really, students struggle with, because it does, especially if you start your research, as most people will, online, and rightfully so. That's where we usually start. It does sometimes feel almost hard to know where to start, or some students, and this is the way I felt, you almost don't know what you don't know, because you're just reading all of this lingo that you've maybe never heard before, and it's all blending together. And, every school has, X, Y, and Z clubs, and it feels like every school has a really solid, tight-knit community and all these things, right? And so it's hard to really sift through, well, what makes one school unique from another. Please try to visit if you can. I know that is often really challenging, either financially or time-wise or whatever it may be. One thing I always suggest, depending on where you live, there's always a school that can show you the type of school that you might be looking into, even if it isn't the school you're applying to. So, for example, I live in Chicago, and so I went to Dartmouth, but I live in Chicago now. I know Northwestern is very similar to Dartmouth in a lot of ways. They're a little bit bigger, but it's still, in a very elite school. It's still somewhat liberal arts focused. I can still get the same kind of feel that I can, at like an East Coast Ivy League school, at a Northwestern type school. And so just even visiting there and seeing if I like that, as opposed to maybe going up to, Wisconsin and visiting University of Wisconsin, which is a huge research university, right? Do I like that feel better? Maybe I can't fly all the way out to UCLA or whatever it is that I'm interested in California, but can I get a feel for the different types of colleges that are available to me, and then take it from there as far as, narrowing down specifically where you want to go geographically, et cetera. So that's a big thing that I always try to just mention. Of course, there's college fairs, there's virtual information sessions that are just super accessible locally to most people. And then, another thing, it is invaluable to just talk to people as well. I know it's tough as a high school student. You may not have a huge network of adults that that have gone to a bunch of different colleges, but I know for sure you have some teachers at your school that maybe have gone to some local colleges or colleges that are further away. Think about your friends. Do they have older siblings that have gone to college? Any sort of just anecdotal evidence that you can collect is also very helpful. So just really start to think about, who can I talk to? Whose experiences can I get? You certainly cannot judge a college or an experience by one person's story, but it definitely, aggregating all of that over time, will really help you fully understand what different programs are like and what they may have to offer. Probably a little bit better than just reading website after website after website.
I can cover this one, and then feel free to chime in. So this is also the time to start thinking about your SAT or your ACT. One thing you may be looking to decide is which one to take, so that's kind of a whole other topic, but depending on kind of what the schools are looking for and what your strengths are. But you want to start kind of making a plan, because this is not a test you want to go into blind. You want to make sure that you've had time to practice, prepare, to try to take it in a very similar setting. So the one thing that I suggest doing is, before you even create a study plan, for a lot of folks, one thing that can be helpful is just taking a practice test. A lot of times you'll do that as your PSAT at school. But take one home, set aside the right amount of time, get yourself in a quiet environment, and take it as if it were the real thing. And then take a look and see how you did, what was easy, what was hard, and use that to create your study plan. So you know where you need to focus and where you maybe just need the refresh and a little bit of time just to make sure you're not forgetting anything, but it's easy enough for you. So once you've done that, again, practice. I think as many practice tests as you can take, especially in a real feeling setting, is just so helpful. Once you go in that day to take your real test, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. So if you've just tried it a bunch of times and you kind of know what to expect, really help to ease your nerves a bit. Also, make sure you take a look to see what the upcoming test dates are. I think it's helpful to kind of leave yourself, 2 dates to take it, right? So think of, okay, I'm going to take it on this first date, and if I need to take it again, I'm going to give myself like an extra month in between to prep for the second iteration, just in case you don't get what you wanted the first time. Yeah, and obviously, like if you need help, like everybody has different studying styles and learning styles and test taking styles. So this is another, this whole process, self-reflection, this is another moment for self-reflection. Think about what really helps for you. If you don't like, if you know that you're not good at studying last minute, don't study last minute. If you know that you need to do like 10 minutes a day for a really long time, make that your plan. Be really cognizant of what works for you. Because if it didn't work in all the years of high school, it's probably not going to work for the SAT. You got to really figure out what approach works for you. Some people will find that like a tutor is very helpful. Other people will find that they like the independent study. Some will find taking practice tests. Others will find like breaking it down into sections. So try different things, see what's helping you, and just practice. Anything to add?
I feel like I have to jump in with this just because it's super topical. So I don't know if anyone has seen the news, but Dartmouth is one of the only schools so far, Dartmouth was the first Ivy League school. Some other schools may plan to add this back in, but the SAT has become optional at, I would say, most institutions at this point since COVID, and it has stuck. Dartmouth just reinstated it as a requirement. And there's a lot of kind of buzz and talk right now in the elite colleges as to what's going to happen next at some of the others. And so, the way that we were talking even a year ago about SAT, ACT was like, it's very much optional and you don't need to worry about it too much. And colleges are moving away from it. It sounds like some may be swinging back in the other direction. The reasons why I think is a totally different story. And like, we just don't have time to discuss that, even though it's fascinating. But all of that said, definitely, if you have been hearing, oh, it's optional, I'm not too worried about it, especially if you're going to be applying next year, the year after, I would just start to really kind of maybe reframe your mindset and start to maybe prepare for this to be, weighted a little bit more heavily than it has been in the last, 4 or 5 years and plan ahead in that way.
All right.
Awesome. I'll dive into this. We already talked about a lot of this as far as, again, choosing your courses and making sure that you're challenging yourself and really being intentional about, what you're doing as far as academics. A couple of things to highlight. Again, make sure that you're familiar with the requirements of the programs you're applying to and make sure you're in the correct courses. Another thing to just keep in mind is these grades do count. And so, don't think that colleges wouldn't see your semester 1 grades, and all of your grades are going to see all of your grades at some point. And so, the worst thing in the world would be to get distracted senior year or just, think you can coast and, not do so well and then have an acceptance potentially, taken back or something like that because you didn't do as well as you had been doing. And so very, very important to keep up any level of, academic achievement that you had in years prior. And then again, it's just so much opportunity on the table to really, one, kind of, again, prove yourself in ways that, maybe making up for a course you didn't do so well in by taking the next level and really showing that you can do well, et cetera. But also just, I would say just making sure that you have something to maybe talk about on your supplements and in your essay as well, right? This is not only, can I show that I can get an A in AP Bio after getting a C in freshman bio? This is like, let me tell you a story about a time I failed and I got a tutor and I, worked my butt off to get this grade because I really want to study biology in college and this is my passion. And so, it's not all about the transcript. Sometimes like the journey behind this and the reflection behind all of this academic work you're doing also just makes a great story. And so definitely don't discount that.
I think we've touched on most of this, but that it's time to take a look and make sure that you have activities where you're not just a participant, you're not just kind of like one of many people, members of a team, and look for opportunities to really show leadership. And leadership can take a lot of different forms, right? Like leadership can be being like a captain of a team, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be finding like a problem on a team and helping to solve it. It can be it can be identifying like a need for a club that doesn't exist and trying to gather people to start that. It can be taking on like an independent project. There are a lot of different ways that you can show leadership. So it's not like an end-all be-all if you're not the, president of this and the captain of this other thing. What you really have to look for are, where did I actually make like a difference to the community? Where did I make a difference to a team? Where did I make a difference to the school? And what are the opportunities for me to really try to do that? So those are some of the types of things to reflect on and look for, and make sure that what you're doing senior year is really meaningful, not just to colleges, but to you as well. You want to make sure that what you're doing feels worth your time and feels like something you're passionate about. And please over that, Shannon.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick again. I think this is another big thing I see all the time with extracurriculars. There's oftentimes I think this is more targeted a little bit towards if you are like a freshman or sophomore and you're still trying to figure out, what am I doing with my summers and how am I piecing all of this together? There are so many students that I think put a lot of pressure on themselves to do one of those, very expensive, flashy pre-college programs where you go sleep away at the college for 3 weeks. And, again, I'm going to use a pre-med example. I hear from doctors and I hear from researchers and we do all these different activities, and that's awesome. And I love it. But that should not be your only experience. And I think that, a lot of students think, well, if I do the Harvard program this summer and the Penn program next summer, and then Columbia the summer after that, like that's going to look so good. I'm going to have these amazing colleges on my resume. And again, those programs, some of them are competitive and they definitely do look good. I think if you're going to do a program like that, it oftentimes is a little bit more exploratory. And that should happen in like 9th or 10th grade. There are some exceptions, and I truly am just talking about the type of program where you are going and you're sitting in a classroom and you're listening to lectures. There are others that are more internship based, research based, which are amazing. And I'll talk about those in a second. But if this experience you're seeking out is a little bit more passive in this way, where you're just going kind of for an experience, make sure that that's not the entirety of your resume. And so really it's important to be able to say, oh, I did this program in 9th grade. I learned all about different specialties in medicine. I was able to sit in on different lectures and I made friends and it was awesome. Great. And then how have you taken that to then say, I realized I am really interested in oncology or microbiology or whatever it is. And then I went and I sought out a research internship, or I started this club at my school. So it's really about taking those like more passive experiences and really creating an experience for yourself that just shows a little bit more what I would call thought leadership. And so all of this to say, leadership does not have to be, like we were just saying, it doesn't have to be, I'm the president of this club or I'm in charge of this or that. But how can you take it was really cool to hear from these doctors about their research, to I am now doing my own research. Or, I've had students that have come to me really stressed out and putting pressure on themselves to start a business, and they really want to really show thought leadership in that way. That's awesome. That's also really, really hard to do. You don't necessarily need to like literally start a business, but how can you start an organization where you bring people together and have some sort of impact on a community, right? So you don't need, I remember, specifically a student that was talking, I just don't know how to get these licenses, and I just really want to have a business on my resume. And like, that's so awesome. And I love, that ambition and all of that. But he was able to tell the same story with a lot less headaches to really just think about, okay, what can I tangibly do right now to have an impact on my community, as opposed to worrying about, what's going to be quote unquote most impressive on paper. So all that said, it's really about the story you tell and how you show that initiative and that thought leadership, more so than, oh, I was at Harvard last summer or whatever it may be. And then I'll jump in with this last one. So last step is really just planning ahead for the college applications themselves. You really want to familiarize yourself with this process as early as possible. There are a lot of variables. I'm a first-gen college student, so it was confusing for me. But even if like your parents went to college and they have a ton of experience, things change over the years. It's still a really complicated, confusing process, I think, for anyone. And so just really having a good sense of exactly step-by-step what you need to do will just alleviate so much stress on the back end, because you're not going to be caught off guard with, oh, what do you mean I needed 3 letters of rec? I only asked 2 teachers, right? Like those kind of things. And so not only understanding the common application and which schools are not on the common application and what goes into it, but really getting granular with the school requires 2 letters of rec. The school requires 1 from a science teacher because I'm applying to the engineering school or whatever it is going to take so much stress off of you later on, especially if you can do this in the summer as you transition, because you're going to be potentially taking that really hard course, or you're going to be potentially taking on that new leadership role or whatever it is during senior year. Start your essays as early as possible, at least brainstorming. If you work with a counselor like one of us, we love to look at your essays over and over again. I love to see them as many times as possible, but I can't do that if you don't start your essay until November and your essay is due on January 1st. So just, keep that in mind. The more you can draft, the more you can have someone look things over, the better, of course. And then timeline will go a long way as well. That's something that, counselors like us will help you with, but just really being able to have that checklist so everything's in front of you, there's nothing you're missing, and then you can just check things off as you go, is super, super helpful.
Fantastic. All right, let's talk about some tips for staying on track, and then we'll go into the Q&A. I see we have some great questions already, so if you have any more, pop those in the Q&A, and we'll get to those in just a couple minutes.
We can cover these, and a lot of it we've already spoken to, but you want to definitely set your goals, right? That's what schools am I aiming for, and what am I aiming for academically? What am I aiming for on the extracurricular side? Making sure that that's really clear to you so that you're not kind of like panicking all over the place. Oh, I don't know what I'm trying to achieve here. The second thing is creating that timeline and making sure that you've captured really all of the steps that are involved. This is so helpful, and to the extent that you can get as much as possible done during the summer, as we mentioned, it's just such a burden off of your shoulders, because you don't want to be in your senior year with those really tough classes, overwhelmed with tests and studying and writing your essays while you're half asleep. That's not going to be productive for most people. There will be exceptions, but definitely try to make a timeline and stick to it, and try to get the bulk of this work done before the school year starts back up. Planners and calendars, very helpful. Everyone has their own organization strategies, so be aware of what yours is. Some people are sprinters, others are marathoners. If you're a sprinter, just don't leave the sprint for November. Think about the sprint maybe in the summer, like maybe do a week on and a week off or something like that. If you're a marathoner, then you know that you're going to do a little bit each day during the summer. But make sure that you have the plan that works for you, depending on what kind of habits are more productive for you. Not everybody is like an early riser, not everybody's a night owl, so figure out what the best time to have that kind of work get done is, and like stick to it, right? Like maybe SAT studying time, that can be, morning, but maybe you're creative in nighttime and that's when you're going to do your essay work. Just be conscious of that kind of stuff. I think one thing that I just encourage people to give themselves permission to do is, if I'm sitting down like every morning to write my essay and nothing is coming out and I'm just like staring at a screen or, going to whatever, TikTok or something, then this is not working for me and this is a waste of time. Like, you need to figure out a different plan, and it is okay if it's not the same plan that works for other people. So maybe that is, okay, I've tried this for a few days. Now I'm going to go to the library and do it there. Just be really conscious that you're not wasting your time trying a strategy that doesn't work for you. And that's kind of the idea. Also about like adaptability. Part of the idea, at least, about adaptability. Adaptability in many forms, right? You want to be open to different schools. The schools that you thought you might go to when you were in middle school may not be the ones that you're going to have the best experience at. And so I really suggest that you be super open and look at different schools, talk to people, and explore different opportunities. And then counseling services, this is a great opportunity if you need help. There's like definitely, it's nice to have like a little bit of hand holding and feel comfortable and get some support. And you can get that, through Quad. You can get that a little bit through your school as well. So definitely take advantage of opportunities that are available to you to get help from others. Ask your friends, ask your parents, ask your teachers. Get those relationships going so that you can really get support during this process. And yeah, schedule breaks. Don't overdo it. The whole thing is a marathon. You don't want to be so burnt out by the end of high school that you get to college and you're like, I can't sit anymore, right? You want to make sure you still have some energy left to finish up your senior year really strong and to start your college experience in a positive way. Yeah, anything to add?
I don't think so. Let's save some time for the questions, I think.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for all of that information. I know we covered a ton. We did get a question that I just want to cover quickly about a recording being sent out. We are sending out a recording. You'll get it in the next few days. So don't worry. If you miss something, you will get to see the whole webinar. All right. So first question we have is summer internship or summer college immersion programs for credit. Which one do you admissions officers tend to value more, if either?
I can jump in on this one. I think, I wouldn't say there's like a clear answer here at all as to which one would be valued more by an admissions officer. I do, I will go back to just what I was saying before about this all being just part of a big kind of narrative and story that you're telling. And so if your, immersion program for credit is something you're just doing to say you did, right, that's going to shine through because you're not going to have a ton to say about it in your essays. I love an internship because usually there's a lot more room for creativity and that thought leadership that I'm talking about, where you're actively doing some sort of project or working on something or problem solving or whatever it might be. There's just more room to be able to talk about failures, challenges, successes, things you've learned, whatever it may be. And so that's just an awesome experience to have. But, if this immersion program for credit is you're taking courses that you're super interested in and it's expanding your view of what you want to do in a different way, and you have something to say about that, that's awesome too. And so, I definitely, especially without knowing your profile, couldn't advise you either way. I don't think there's any inherent right or wrong answer here. It really comes down to where do you maybe have some gaps in your profile, and where can you really get the most value as far as just stories and lessons that you're able to kind of bring into the application.
Great. Perfect. All right. So we have someone whose school has 4 1-credit classes per semester, and some is concerned that some core classes might not fit until the second semester, it seems like, of senior year. Will colleges give weight to that in terms of rigor? And if you're applying early action or early decision, can you show your intended classes for the second semester if you're worried about those not like getting in the essential classes?
I can jump in here too, if that's okay. So I think
fun with your experience.
Couple of things to say here. I would say first thing, if you're worried about your school being unique or like that whole thing, the college you apply to will get what's called a school profile. And that will basically tell them how your school is set up. So it'll say, here's the GPA system we use. Here's how we do class rank, or maybe we don't do class rank. Or in your case, right, it'll say we offer 4 1-credit classes per semester, and this is what students are allowed to do. And that way you will be evaluated within that context. And so, of course, just to really make this a very clear example, they're never going to look at you and say, oh, you only took 4 courses? Well, this other kid took 6. They're much better than you. No, of course not, right? Because they know you took as many as were available to you. And so that's kind of step one. So I don't want, if any of you have questions about, well, my school's a little weird, my school's a little different, don't worry about that. You will be only evaluated within that context. As far as showing your intended classes for second semester, different schools require different things as far as reporting, what you're currently taking, what you have taken, and what you will be taking. Worst case scene, almost every application, definitely the Common App has a space called additional information where you can write that in. And so even if you can't report that in a different way or they don't ask for it, right? Again, every school is different. If you are concerned about it, you can literally just write in, hey, I just wanted you to know because of my school's requirements, I will be taking X, Y, and Z courses. I think that's an important part of my profile. And you can explicitly say that.
Great. Fantastic. And then do either of you have any suggestions on places that students can start researching schools other than the school websites?
I think, as you mentioned, was like a really, really helpful, right? Talk to people, talk to students at your school that may have already gone there, talk to teachers, talk to people in your community, to the extent you can. That's a really great way to get like more of a feel for what that place is like. And I love that idea about looking for universities that are similar. Obviously, like schools now have social media presences. Like there's lots of blogs to look at too. School websites can be very difficult. They're very like packaged up. So you kind of want some of the more like real feelings about things. So I think people are one of the best places to go to for that. There are certainly books as well. Go ahead.
All right. AP versus IB programs. Do schools look at those differently?
Long story short, I think like most things, it is very much kind of context dependent. I think, step one is what does your school offer? So of course, again, just to emphasize this, if some of you are like, wait, I've never even heard of IB. What is that? I only have AP at my school. That's fine, right? So you're not going to, of course, there's going to be no preference either way as far as what your school offers. So if they don't offer one or the other, they are both seen as kind of like more advanced steps and coursework to take. And so take advantage of either one of them and either one of them works. If your school offers both and the question is, well, which one is better? Again, there's no straightforward answer here. It's not definitely take IB. It's way harder. It's way more rigorous, whatever it is. They're just slightly different. They focus on different things. AP is a little bit more subject specific where you take very specific courses, where IB is a more kind of, it's more of I guess it's like one big program as opposed to you're taking just whichever AP classes you want. And so it can absolutely be super impressive and impactful. I think it just depends on where your interests lie and where your strengths are, what kind of, pathway you carve out. And again, the entirety of your profile, I think, will be a big piece of this too. And so if I or your school counselor or whomever you're working with knew the whole story a little bit better, they may be able to advise you a little bit better which one would be a good fit.
Great. All right, we have a question about passion projects. And is it better to start a passion project during your junior year rather than keeping it only to the summer and continuing through senior year?
I can take a pass at this. I think this really depends, right? Like, how did you discover your passion project? Is it something that you discovered early and you can continue to do it and show a lot of progress over junior and senior year? If so, that's awesome. But if you don't figure out what that is until junior year summer, that's also not the end of the world. If you get started then and can show that you're making some progress on it in your senior year as well. Sometimes it just takes some time for people to figure out what that area of interest is. But if you don't start it until later, what you'll be looking for is kind of like the connections that led you to it. Kind of like the example shared, right, of I'm going to take these classes as part of this college immersion program, and that's what's going to show me that I'm really interested in this type of medicine. And then I'll go on and do that passion project or do the research that's specific there.
Great. I know a lot of answers to these questions are, it depends on the context. So definitely, reach out to us if you will want to talk about your specific circumstances, and we can look at all of the factors with your own specific question and help you navigate a way through that. I think we have time for a couple more questions. So if someone is thinking about double majoring or pursuing 2 degrees in separate, unrelated subjects, is there a way to go about telling your story without seeming unfocused? A specific question asker is aiming to do piano performance in neuroscience. Any quick thoughts there?
Start with asking yourself why you want to do that, because you probably have a good reason. And then go from there. Again, that's a little bit of a tricky one, right? Without having the context of your history in both of those spaces. But I think, again, self-reflection. Why is that your interest? What does piano performance do for you that neuroscience doesn't? Or do they do the same thing? Kind of figuring out, why do you like both of those things? And looking for that as a starting place can be helpful.
I think it's very okay to have interests in different topics and areas, and colleges understand that. And I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to connect those within essays and your extracurriculars as well.
And I think it can also be very nice, right? Because that's unusual. That'll stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. How soon do students need to narrow down a major?
Great question. This is very much dependent on what you want to do. And so I talked a little bit about this, different types of schools. So I went to Dartmouth, like I mentioned, a liberal arts school. Dartmouth is very, I think almost very far in the direction of you are not allowed to choose a major and until later on. And so we actually had to wait until our sophomore year to even pick a major because their focus as a school, which is a little bit unique, is that they really, really want you to explore and just take courses just for fun or just try them out and then figure it out later. So some schools are like that. Some, will allow you to come in undeclared and you can choose a major if you want to right away, but you don't have to. Dartmouth, on the other hand, really just kind of forced you to not choose a major and really wanted you to kind of sit with that, exploratory kind of feeling. On the other end of the spectrum are some of the more specific programs at some of the larger research universities. So like I mentioned, Engineering is a big example of this, where you might have to apply to, the School of Engineering, or sometimes business programs, you have to apply to the School of Business and you have to get into that program, in which case you have to pretty much know you want to do business or engineering or whatever it is, because that's a specific program at, the University of Wisconsin in Madison or whatever kind of larger school we're talking about.
Yeah. Great. All right. So I know there's some questions we haven't gotten to. Definitely reach out to us, send us an email, schedule a consultation, and we can answer those directly. And a reminder, we are sending out a recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to look back at it if you missed anything or refer to it later. So keep an eye on our website for upcoming webinars. We have a ton of webinars coming up covering some great topics that we get a ton of questions about. So you can sign up for those for free. You can view past webinars for free as well on our website. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Dominique, Marina, it was great to have you both. Definitely learned a lot from both of you. And so, yeah, thank you. And to everyone that joined us, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that we'll see you at future webinars. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.